Good morning. Welcome to Kenya News Update today. I'm your host, and we begin with breaking developments from the aviation sector. The nationwide airport workers' strike that paralyzed air travel across Kenya for nearly 2 days has been called off. The Kenya Aviation Workers Union, KAWU, officially suspended its industrial action late Tuesday, February 17th, following a marathon negotiation session brokered by the Ministry of Transport and the Ministry of Labor. This comes after a deal was reached with the Kenya Civil Aviation Authority, KCAA operations at Jomo Kenyatta International Airport, Moi International Airport, and all regional airstrips are now returning to normal. But the 2-day disruption has left a significant mark, affecting an estimated 120 scheduled flights and causing delays for thousands of travelers. The financial impact on the aviation and tourism sectors is still being calculated, with preliminary estimates suggesting losses could exceed 500 million shillings. We'll dive deep into the deal that ended the standoff, analyze what it means for workers and passengers, and explore the lingering questions about Kenya's aviation infrastructure resilience. Stay with us. Let's first understand the background. The Kenya Aviation Workers Union, representing over 2,500 personnel across air traffic control, security, fire and rescue, and technical services, issued a strike notice on Friday, February 13th. Their grievances were multifaceted. Primarily, they demanded the immediate implementation of a collective bargaining agreement, CBA, that had been pending for nearly 18 months. This CBA covered salary increments and improved allowances. Secondly, the union raised serious concerns over alleged staff shortages, claiming that critical departments like air traffic control were operating with only 70% of their required manpower, a situation they labeled a severe safety risk. Thirdly, they protested against what they termed unfair labor practices, including the casualization of jobs and delayed promotions. The Kenya Civil Aviation Authority, KCAA, the employer and regulator, initially responded by stating that negotiations were ongoing and urging the union to return to the table, warning that a strike would be illegal as essential services were involved. However, with no resolution by Sunday night, the union made good on its threat. At 6 a.m. on Monday, February 16th, the strike commenced. The immediate impact was severe and swift. At Jomo Kenyatta International Airport, Kenya's primary aviation hub handling approximately 85% of the country's air traffic, operations were thrown into chaos. While a skeleton management team attempted to maintain basic functions, the absence of unionized air traffic controllers, safety officers, and fire crew meant significant reductions in capacity. The Kenya Airports Authority reported that by 9:15 a.m. on Monday, only 15 inbound and outbound flights had been processed, compared to the typical 45 for that same morning period. Major airlines, including Kenya Airways, Ethiopian Airlines, Emirates, and British Airways, were forced to delay, divert, or cancel flights. Social media was flooded with images and videos of frustrated passengers stranded at terminals. One traveler, John M1G, who was trying to get to Dubai, told our correspondent, "I've been here since 5 a.m. My flight was at 8. Now they say maybe this evening. No one is telling us anything clear." The ripple effects extended beyond JKIA Wilson Airport, crucial for domestic and humanitarian flights, saw all scheduled services grounded. Moi International Airport in Mombasa experienced similar disruptions, dealing a direct blow to the coastal tourism circuit during a relatively busy season. Now, let's look at the numbers that define this crisis. Over the full 44-hour duration of the strike, from 6 a.m. Monday to 10 p.m. Tuesday, a total of 120 scheduled commercial flights were directly affected. This breakdown shows the scale. 68 flights were canceled outright. 42 flights experienced delays exceeding 3 hours. 10 international flights were diverted to neighboring airports, primarily Entebbe in Uganda and Dar es Salaam in Tanzania. The financial implications are staggering. Each canceled flight represents a direct loss in revenue for airlines, airport fees, and associated services like catering and fuel. Tourism stakeholders estimate that the disruption likely caused a loss of approximately 5,000 tourist bed nights in Nairobi and the coast, translating to a direct revenue loss of around 300 million shillings for hotels, tour operators, and restaurants. When you factor in airline losses, cargo delays, and reputational damage to Kenya as a reliable aviation hub, industry analysts we spoke to believe the total economic cost could easily surpass 500 million shillings. This incident has also spotlighted the long-standing issue of staffing. The unions claim that air traffic control is operating at a 30% deficit is particularly alarming. While the KCAA has previously stated it has a recruitment plan, the strike has forced this issue to the forefront of national discourse. The turning point came on Tuesday afternoon. Following intense pressure from the government, which was acutely aware of the mounting economic and reputational damage, a high-level negotiation team was convened. Led by the Cabinet Secretary for Transport and his counterpart from Labor, the team brought together KCAA management and KAWU leadership. The talks, held at the Ministry of Transport headquarters, lasted for over 9 hours. Sources close to the negotiations described them as tense but ultimately productive. The breakthrough came when the government, acting as a guarantor, committed to fast-tracking the implementation of the disputed CBA, the specific details of the return-to-work formula, signed at 8:30 p.m. on Tuesday, includes several key points. First, a commitment to conclude and implement the 2024 to 2026 CBA within the next 30 days. Second, the establishment of a joint technical committee to address the staff shortage issue, with a preliminary report due in 60 days. Third, an immediate halt to any perceived unfair labor practices, with a review mechanism. Fourth, and crucially, a no victimization clause for all union members who participated in the strike. In exchange, KAWU agreed to immediately and unconditionally call off the strike and direct all its members to report for their next shifts. Union Secretary General M1G Githinji, in a brief statement, said, "We have secured a firm commitment on the CBA and on addressing the systemic issues that endanger both workers and the flying public. Our members will return to work, but we will be vigilant." So, who won and who lost in this showdown? Let's present the perspectives. From the union's viewpoint, this is a significant victory. They successfully used industrial action to break a protracted stalemate on the CBA and forced the government and KCAA to publicly commit to a timeline. They also brought national attention to their concerns about understaffing and safety, which they believe had been ignored. A union representative we spoke to argued, "This wasn't just about pay. It was about preventing a major accident. Our air traffic controllers are overworked." This deal means that issue can no longer be swept under the rug. However, critics of the union's approach see it differently. They argue that holding the national aviation infrastructure hostage was reckless and illegal, given that aviation is designated an essential service under Kenyan law. A travel industry analyst commented, "The ends do not justify the means. The economic carnage inflicted on innocent businesses and travelers is disproportionate." There were other avenues they should have exhausted. From the KCAA and government's perspective, getting the workers back to the towers and runways was the immediate priority to restore normalcy. They have secured operational continuity, but at the cost of significant concessions and under the shadow of a 30-day deadline. The government's role as broker and guarantor also raises questions about the long-term financial sustainability of the CBA for the state-owned authority. For the traveling public, the overwhelming sentiment is one of relief tinged with frustration. While glad the strike is over, many question why it was allowed to happen in the first place and whether the underlying issues are truly resolved or merely postponed. This strike has exposed several critical vulnerabilities in Kenya's aviation sector that demand a broader debate. First is the perennial conflict between the right to strike and the provision of essential services. Kenyan law is clear that workers in essential services cannot strike freely, yet this strike happened. Does this indicate a failure of the existing dispute resolution mechanisms? Should the law be amended to provide for compulsory arbitration in such sectors before a strike can be contemplated? Second is the issue of funding and autonomy for the KCAA as a regulator. It must maintain the highest safety standards, which requires adequate, well-compensated staff. Yet its funding model may be constrained. If it cannot attract and retain enough air traffic controllers without government intervention, does that point to a deeper structural problem? Third is Kenya's economic exposure. In an increasingly connected world, a 44-hour shutdown of a major hub like JKIA has disproportionate regional consequences. It disrupts regional trade, damages investor confidence, and tarnishes the brand Kenya that the government has worked hard to build. This incident should serve as a wake-up call for a comprehensive review of the sector's contingency planning and labor relations framework. Some experts are already calling for the establishment of a permanent independent aviation mediation panel to handle disputes before they escalate to this level. Looking ahead, the next 30 to 60 days will be crucial. The signed agreement has set clear deadlines, CBA implementation within 30 days, and a staff shortage report within 60 days. The credibility of all parties, the union, KCAA management, and the government ministries, now rests on their ability to deliver on these promises in good faith. Any delay or perceived backtracking could trigger an even more disruptive round of industrial action. Furthermore, the travel public and the business community will be watching closely. They will demand transparency on the progress of the Joint Technical Committee and assurances that the safety concerns are being addressed with urgency. This episode also occurs under the national spotlight of President William Ruto's administration, which has championed a bottom-up economic model. A stable and efficient aviation sector is critical to that vision, meaning the president's office will likely be monitoring the post-strike follow-through intensely. For now, the immediate crisis has been averted. Flights are resuming, schedules are being normalized, and stranded passengers are finally reaching their destinations. But the turbulence may not be fully over. The real test of this deal is not in its signing, but in its execution. The hope is that all stakeholders have learned a costly lesson and will choose dialogue over disruption in the future. For Kenya News Update today, this has been a deep dive into the airport strike and its aftermath. We'll continue to follow this story. Subscribe to Kenya News Update today for more detailed reporting. Thank you for watching.